Welcome to This Academic Life, Episode 70.
This episode is sponsored by the School of Engineering at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Did you know that George Low, an engineer from RPI and also a past president of RPI, led the Apollo project that put man on the moon? It's fitting that 50 years later, the mission commander of the Artemis moon mission is another RPI engineer and astronaut, G. Reed Wiseman.
Hi, my name is Kim Lewis, and I'm a professor of physics and associate dean for research.
Hi, my name is Pania Newell. I'm a professor of mechanical engineering.
Hi, my name is Lucy Zhang. I am also a professor of mechanical engineering. First, we'd like to thank our listeners for the overwhelming response on our recent episode 68 on implicit bias. We're so glad that our stories resonated with so many people, men and women alike. We're very grateful for your support and encouragement. So today we're going to talk about competing clocks. The clocks that we're referring to here are the tenure clock and the biological clock. The reason that we're talking about this today is because I've been increasingly asked by young women in academics what they should prioritize when it's time to choose having a family and getting tenure, just so that we can have the same time clock here. So many of us start our academic career in the late 20s or early 30s after receiving their PhD or some postdoc training. Tenure track positions, at least in the US, typically span 6 to 7 years. Some go, of course, as long as 9 years, assuming there were no competing clocks and you get tenure and then think about having children, you'll be in your late 30s or even early 40s by the time you have children. So the biological clock is not as forgiving as many other clocks. So you might have missed the golden opportunity by this point. We all know that most tenure track faculty are already overwhelmed by the amount of expectation of getting tenure. But research shows that women are particularly affected by this expectation. Research shows that women in tenure track positions in science disciplines at research-intensive institutions are more likely to acquire tenure if they're unmarried and or childless than their married peers with children. The issues of family responsibilities and childbearing have real consequences for women in science. The consequence of having to choose having an academic career or motherhood can be devastating, especially for women and certainly the entire academic ecosystem. What would you advise women junior faculty if someone approached you with this question?
It's such a personal question that I think it really involves a lot of self-reflection by the person who's asking the question. I think it is appropriate to give your feedback about what you did if you are a mother and you had to make that type of decision. And I also think it's appropriate to just talk about it from your perspective. If it turns out you do not have kids. In my case, I do not have kids. And I recall giving a junior faculty member advice, and they didn't ask me directly what should be my priority. Should it be the biological clock or the tenure clock? But they asked me, what thing do I most regret? And I used that opportunity to say, oh, I think I regret like not having the family or choosing the tenure clock over the biological clock. And so that was just my perspective. And I think my answer at the time when I made that decision to choose the tenure clock over the biological clock, a lot of it had to do with my background and how I was raised and what my goals were. And I think that really influenced that decision. So that's why I say I think it's really a lot about self-reflection. And now my priorities have changed. And looking back, I'm like, why did I make that decision? But at the time, it was the best decision for me because I was in a different space. I was the first one in my family to do this academic route, first one in my family to get a PhD. And so you just kind of keep going along that track. And so having a family would really kind of alter the goals that I had at that time, not thinking that I can possibly do them simultaneously. So that was my response to that junior faculty member. And I followed that up by saying what I should have done was just freeze my eggs. And then that way I wouldn't feel like I had to make a decision in that moment. So I did tell her that. And guess what? She took my advice. And then the first year of her tenure track position, she froze her eggs, and she thanked me all the time for like telling her she did that, because now she feels free to not keep constantly going back to, is it the biological clock or the 10 o'clock? Now that biological, she feels free from that biological part.
That is amazing, Kim. Wow, thanks for sharing. That's really amazing. For myself, I'm a mother of two. You know, at the time I got married, I'd say pretty late. I mean, not super late, but you know, in my early 30s. At the time, it was not even a choice for me. I wanted to have children because I didn't want to regret at some point in my life. Maybe some subconsciously, my parents had always told me biological clock can't wait. Maybe it's that influence, but it was never a choice for me. So right after I got married, I've told my husband that we got to have kids right away. And tenure clock, it wasn't even part of the equation when I made that decision. For me, it was very easy. I guess I just did it, and it's the timing happened to work out really, really perfectly because by the time I was pregnant, I simultaneously put in my tenure package. So both things really did not interfere each other, which feel very fortunate about. I know many people may not have that choice based on their situation, the timing and all. So I think I just let things flow as they go at the time. So it wasn't so much competing in my case. But I do remember, so many years ago when I started graduate school, I met met up with a good friend of mine from high school. And she was in medical school at the time, very intense. And they were doing internships and fellowship, very demanding schedule. She got married early, way early, like in her 20s, early 20s. And I remember she telling me, asking her mentor at the time, like at, you know, at the doctor mentor. And she said, I asked my mentor, should I wait to have kids? I'm so busy right now. I'm doing, you know, she was doing fellows and internships or 2 fellowships at Mayo, and it was just really intense. Her mentor said, what are you talking about? Why are you choosing career over life choices? And she said she immediately decided that she's going to have children because at the time she wasn't sure, and the mentor kind of gave her that advice, and then she ended up having twins the year after. Maybe that story subconsciously resided in my mind afterwards, because even at the time I wasn't even thinking about getting married. So I think maybe some of that, you know, as you go through life, you meet people and people say things, and then that kind of rooted in your brain at some point. So a lot of that, and also just my parents telling me that biological clock is the priority. So as they're saying that, so that kind of shaped my decision. So yeah, that's kind of where I came from. And then when junior faculty, women faculty asked me, I got 2 recently simultaneously asking me at the same conference, 2 different women who didn't know each other, asking me exactly the same thing. They just started tenure track. They're having this feel like very hard decision for them to make. So I told them that if you ever want to have children, just do it. Because I feel, this is, my personal opinion shared with them. I feel like you can have both. Why not? Why not have both? Even if you have to give up the career path or academic career path, you're going to have another job. Life moves on. You might think that going back, it could maybe the best choice you made. I don't know. But I was just thinking, I wondered if nowadays, simply the pressure, the amount of expectation out of junior faculty had also increased over the years. Maybe I feel like so. I remember when we started, Kim, when both of you and me, we started our junior faculty life. I don't know. I don't remember people talking about that issue a lot. I just feel like there are more and more people asking me that question now than before.
Yeah, I think it's because tenure track is hard and finding a partner is even harder, right? So I think you're probably getting more questions because the amount of time you need to spend finding a partner is sometimes another job. It's almost equivalent to writing proposals, meeting the deadlines. You have to build a spreadsheet, figure out what's his likes and dislikes, doesn't match up with yours. Similar thing you have to do with writing a proposal. What are the outcomes? It's a lot of work, especially if you want to choose the right partner. And as scientists, we think very carefully, right, about all qualities of the person that we want to be with. And so a little bit of it is just occupational hazard. We're using our scientific critical ability and critical thinking skills and we're using that to find a partner. And so for us, it's work on both ends because we're using the same parts of our brain to make a decision, a life-changing decision. Should I study molecular electronics or should I go into IETS or should I date this guy, that works here? I mean, I'm making light of it, but it really is a very serious decision, and we treat it almost equivalent to the tenure track position because we want to get it right the first time. Again, occupational hazard.
Yeah, I really agree with Kim. I think that it's very, very personal. And I honestly, if somebody asked me, I would say that, well, you and your partner need to figure it out. You should not even ask people from the workforce because this is a whole different category, life versus work. And so maybe people, they look at it differently, but if somebody partner says that, well, I'll leave you unless we have a kid right now, do they prefer that over their job? So I think that other people, they should be involved, but then can we talk about the technology advancement? Maybe soon enough we are all turning to robots. I think that's what academia is doing to us, right? No emotion, no feeling, and then forget about biological clock and then just focus on tenure clock. That's what they want us to do, right? So which is very, very wrong. And then Lucy, you had a good point. You said that, yeah, maybe many years ago, people, they were not talking about it. And I remember that I've never even actually, when I was in grad school, I saw, well, there were not that many women in engineering to start with, but I never saw anybody being even pregnant. But now I see that it's changing. Like, it's a different concept for me, like being a postdoc and being pregnant. No, you need to focus on doing your work, right? Because that's like part of the thing that we've been trained on. But I think that maybe the new generations and then all this discussion is making people to be more aware and make a better choice for themselves rather than just, saying that, oh, I need to prioritize and put my work above my life.
I can't agree more. I think it's a discussion. Actually, you bring out a really good point that the fact that people are open to talk about it is already a progress on its own, right? I mean, used to be close friends talk about it. So, oh, what should I do? And this and that. But now, I mean, I don't know these people who asked me recently at a conference. I met them for the very first time, right? So they're just simply talking. I mean, they felt that they can freely ask that kind of question. There's no taboo. It's no longer like a hidden, shameful type of conversation anymore. You're absolutely right. I think that's probably why we're hearing more and more rather than because the pressure. Maybe the pressure had always been there, that just people afraid to share about their fears. Very true. Very true. But I agree also with Kim's assessment on finding a partner. You remember, I treat it as a job. It's so funny whenever I tell people that I had a spreadsheet of dating criteria, like my future partner criteria. And then people always say, well, so your husband must have ranked at the top. The funny thing is, I ranked all the people that I've dated up to that point. And then when we started dating, I just thought it was perfect. I just thought he was perfect. I'm like, there's no need. Actually, he's not on my spreadsheet. Yeah, so when you meet the right person, they don't have to go there to be measured. But it's quite interesting though. But I mean, we're all having this conversation, right? I mean, among women, I mean, people share their decisions or thinking with us. Do you think men think about these things? They probably share with their partner, but I mean, I don't think I've ever have a close male colleague come to me and asking these type of questions. I mean, they're close, but they don't ask about choosing career choices over their wife's biological clock. I've just never had someone asking me that. Maybe it's not a hard choice for them.
Well, unless I guess if their partner also they are in academia, then maybe that's a question for them. But if they are somebody who's staying at home, maybe that's not a question. Or even they have jobs that they are less stressful, or they don't have a clock like we have in tenure track. But I might be biased, but I think that it's not as serious of a question for them as it is for women.
There is one thing, though, which I had to kind of explore the hard way. It's not about competing clocks. It's about timing. So when I was first pregnant with my first child, I didn't think about timing. So the due date was in the middle of October. And we all know that's kind of in the middle of the fall semester, right in the middle. And my department head at the time asked me, well, how would you like to do this? Would you like to take the semester off and then come back the next semester? Because, you're allowed to have one semester off, paid leave, or you teach sort of halfway through the semester until delivery of the infant, and then take the following however months off, right? So then, but of course, you're only credit for that half a semester of teaching rather than a full, because someone else have to cover you for the remaining half. So I thought about it and I said, oh my goodness, maybe I should just take the entire fall off, because that would at least prepare me just in case the baby comes out early or whatever it is. I don't want it to have to do this sort of emergency shuffle with another faculty and make up the teaching and then have to worry about the other half sometime later. And it was a hard choice for me. I mean, it wasn't not devastating hard choice, but it was something that I had to make, a decision I have to make. And then I came back in January to teach in the spring. So by that point, it was only 2 months, right, after the baby came out. It was really, really hard physically to be physically standing there for 2 hours teaching a class. It was just so difficult. So learned that lesson. My second baby, I timed it. I backed up with the calendar. I said, I'm going to have a summer baby so I can complete the spring semester and then have the baby. Like I timed it to be early June. And so I can have the whole summer and the entire fall off. right? So then I have a connected at least 6 months at home. And it worked out really, really nice. So I'm glad, I was able to learn from the first child. And so with my second one, I was able to kind of time this clock. So I would say that if competing clocks is not an issue, just kind of timing, if you're able to time it, it's quite important. I know people don't usually think about it, but it was a pretty big deal at the time for me. Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts on competing clocks. This is, as we mentioned earlier, it's a very personal choice, and we hope that you don't have to make that hard choice, and hopefully it's an easy one.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. You can follow us on Facebook and listen to our latest episodes on iTunes, Spotify, or Amazon Music. We'd like to thank our sponsor, the School of Engineering at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, for sponsoring this episode. If you're also interested in being a sponsor, please contact us at sponsor@thisacademiclife.org. Join us next time for the good, the bad, and the ugly of this academic life.